Welcome, everybody. This is Shelley Emling. I'm the editor of the Girlfriend newsletter. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. We're so happy to have you guys here tonight because we're going to be talking to Stephen Rowley, who's the author of the Guncle, which is our June book club pick. And so I can't thank you enough for joining us. And I have to say that we are now up to about 42,000 members. 42,000 members of the Girlfriend Book Club. This is amazing. And I'm going to be posting about, I don't know, a couple dozen, 20 or so book giveaways in July. So please, everybody stay on the page and you're going to have so much fun. I'm so happy that you guys are with us. So anyway, so welcome Stephen Rowley, who is the author of The Guncle, which is our book club pick for this month. Welcome.
Hi.
So first of all, thank you so much. As I told you, we have 42,000 members. Every month they pick a book, and I never know if I'm going to like it or not. And I always think, what are they doing? And I read the book, and like this month for June, they picked The Guncle. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. I've never heard about it, much about it.
What a nonsense word, yeah.
And I read it, and once again, I was like, oh my gosh, one of the best books of all time. Like, how do the book club members pick these books every month? So for anybody out there who hasn't read it, and there's probably like 3 of you watching right now, what's it about briefly? Can you just tell us a little bit about what it's
Sure. About? Well, thank you again so much for having me. And 42,000 members, that's incredible. This may be the largest book club I've ever spoken to. But, I'm going to assume for the sake of my nerves that not all 42,000 are on here right now. I'm going to start sweating. But yeah, the Guncle, for those who may not be familiar, well, first of all, the word Guncle, if anyone is still not familiar, has become quite popular slang in the past 5-10 years or so for a gay uncle. Yeah. And more so than that, it carries the connotation of sort of a larger than life personality. If anyone has read the book, might have recognized that I was very much inspired, and I'm a big fan of Auntie Mame, which was a Patrick Dennis novel from the 50s, and then a Rosalind Russell Broadway show and movie, and then an Angela Lansbury Broadway musical, and then a movie musical with Lucille Ball. So it's had a long history. And so I thought it was sort of time for a modern update. And this is a story of such a larger than life character, Patrick O'Hara, who is sort of a retired television actor living in the desert when tragedy strikes, and he is tasked with taking in his niece and nephew for the summer after the death of their mom. And it sort of leads to a season of healing for all 3.
So I know you also have 5 nieces and nephews yourself, right?
I do.
So did you I'm sure you did. You relayed a lot of that into this book, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. In real life, I have 5 nieces and nephews, the oldest of whom is 13. So the book is dedicated to them. And they're not quite old enough to read the novel yet, but they know where to find their name at the front. So, to the extent that I borrowed anything from their lives, hopefully they will forgive me. But I feel for anyone out there who's related to a writer or friends with a writer, because we are sponges. We will take details from real life, and sometimes it's those details that really, just populate a novel in a way that makes it feel rich and alive.
So I know you said that perhaps they don't know much about this, but it must be so interesting for you to write this, and people are reading this as based kind of on your own experiences, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I will say, it's not, people ask all the time if I'm Patrick, if I'm the main character. And I will say we have a lot in common, Patrick's pop cultural references, his sense of humor. I think there's a lot of overlap. He's sadder than I am. He's been through some stuff. And I think I have a slightly more on the level relationship with my nieces and nephews, but perfect people who behave perfectly all the time are not that interesting to write about. So you got to throw in some, some drama.
Yeah.
And certainly, when I first became an uncle, I don't have children of my own, and so I don't think I really knew how to relate to kids, and that's very much true of Patrick as well. At the beginning, I think he talks to them like they're little adults, and that seems like a nightmare, a scenario
Yeah.
for some, including his sister, who doesn't think he should be the one to take in these kids in the face of loss like that.
Right.
But I think surprisingly, what looks like his biggest weakness ultimately turns out to be a strength, because I think when kids are scared or sad, that they don't want to be treated with kid gloves or talked down to in any way, and so they find a way to coexist with one another.
Yeah, I love when they have the big party. It's just like, this is so fun. I can see it happening. It's so great. um, so tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, how you got started in this in writing. I mean, where did you grow up? I mean, how did this? What's your life like?
Yeah. So currently I live in Palm Springs, California, which is where the book takes place. Ironically, I did not live here when I was writing the bulk of the book. We had a weekend place here. And so I had spent a good deal of time here, but I wasn't a full-time resident. And that changed just coincidentally right before the pandemic. We thought, oh, I'm going to try it for a year and see what it's like. And then boom, the world shut down. And on some level, I feel like I'm still trying it. But I grew up in Maine. About as far away from Palm Springs as you can get and still be in the same country.
Maine is the most beautiful state.
It's stunning. It's stunning. And, we talk, the book takes place over the summer, these sort of endless Palm Springs summers when it can be 115 degrees during the day. Summer is the time in Maine. It's the most perfect time. And so I never miss Maine more than I do in the summertime. But yeah, I grew up there. I went to college in Boston. I did not study creative writing. I studied film actually, and came to LA to be a screenwriter. Had a modicum of success with that, but not smashing success by any way. And then when it came time to write what became my first novel, which was called Lily and the Octopus, was a deeply personal story to me. And screenwriting is very collaborative, and you're always waiting for a financier or a director or actors or all sorts of other levels or layers to say yes. And this was such a personal story to me. I didn't want to have other people's input. I wanted to have more authorial control, and I didn't want to wait to put it out in the world like I was growing frustrated with some of my film projects. And so I just coincidentally wrote it as a novel and thought I would give it a go. And that was, it became a success, but it was a little bit of a shock to me. And I published that in my 40s. So it was a relatively new career to me, which I've had since.
Well, okay, so what? And I actually have no notes about this, but I mean, were you interested in something else before this, or were you studying something? Did you do something before writing this? I haven't actually looked up about.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I've always been a writer to a certain degree. In fact, I used to write short stories as a kid. And my dad would bring them to the office. I have such a vivid memory of this. And he sold insurance. So he took it to the insurance office and ran off photocopies of a short story I wrote and brought home maybe 10 copies for family and friends. And I remember my mind blown, like, whoa, there can be more than one copy of something I write. Like, and I think in that day, maybe I knew writing was in my future, but I've always done writing of some sort, even through college. It was more critical writing, or I wrote reviews or writing about film theory. And then creative writing sort of came, with something I did as a kid and then came back to me later as an adult.
So I did ask our members of the book club what I should ask you, and this is not on my list, but I'm curious, did you, I know you have 5 nieces and nephews. Did you run this book by them before it went out in the world, or no?
Yeah, I think there was 1 or 2 things I may have ran by my sister. One of the kids' moms. I would say, hey, can I dip my toes in this water or not? I think not having children of my own, and I don't, and I'm in my 50s now, and I really feel like I'm too tired. I don't do anything, and I get tired, so I feel like that ship has sailed.
Me too. Yeah.
As an artist, I've always been very aware, regardless of how you feel about having them, there's no doubt that having and raising children is one of life's great emotional experiences. And I was always very aware of of not having that in my arsenal. And so when it came time to write the kids, I was certainly asking lots of questions. And I was sometimes I would run details by, by my siblings to see if I was getting them right, because they had more, day-to-day contact with kids, and the same with my friends with kids. But I have the good sense not to put something too personal or too private in.
Okay, that's good. So I know this is being made into a movie. Am I correct?
You are correct. Yeah.
I'm not like, blasting something out there that nobody knows about. I did read that this is being made into
Yes.
a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so how do you feel about that? I mean, that has got to be the most exciting thing. And how much input do you have into that? And what do you say? Like, your family members must be excited. Oh my gosh, my brother's,
Yeah, I think that every once a week they would, hey, where's this movie? I thought it was being made. And it is a slow and painstaking process, and COVID slowed everything down a little bit.
Yeah.
But we're picking up steam. I did write the adaptation myself because I have a little bit of that background in screenwriting. I don't always think it's a good idea for the novelist to adapt the book, but this was close enough to my heart and something I wanted to tackle, and that was a lot of fun. And so we're moving forward. Here we are in June. It's Pride Month, and I want to say there's something about writing a big family, a loving family drama and comedy, but with a queer lead that feels kind of radical in a way. This is a true family film and a family love story, I think, and it's an honor to be a part of that.
Well, so people are asking, when is it coming out?
Yeah, well, it hasn't been filmed yet, even, so it'll be a little while, but it, fingers crossed we could be in production, by the end of the year. So we'll see.
Right. So when writing about Grant and Maisie, obviously, I'm sure you took those characters from your own niece and nephews, and et cetera. Was that fun to write about them, Grant and Maisie, or did you struggle with one more than the other, or were they both really easy to write, or what?
The most fun was writing the scenes with the three of them, right? With Patrick and the two kids. Those were always the most fun, and the scenes where I had to sort of let my imagination go the most wild in some ways, and access the kid within me still. Like, okay, how would a kid work through this, or how would a child think about this? And so that was always great fun, and those are scenes that led to some comedy, and hopefully that the book is very funny. But it's also a book about grief, and I had to remember that these kids are also grieving, and they're a little bit in shock, and the book takes place over about 100 days or so in the course of a summer, and certainly the kids aren't completing their grief journey in that time. In many ways, they're going to they are just beginning their journey. They're going to go home at the end of the summer and have to face life without their mom. And so, in some ways, Patrick is a distraction as much as anything, as they settle into this new reality. So there was lots of layers to sort of piece together. And I think when I began the book, I was thinking of it much more as an outright comedy. And life intervenes sometimes. It takes a while to write a book, and life happens. And as it so happens, I lost my best friend from college to breast cancer early on in the writing process of this book, and she left behind a 6-year-old son. And so I was suddenly thinking about grief, in kids in a very different way. And so it made me think about the two kids in this book, very differently. And so and I felt I had a real responsibility to them. In some way, I mentioned Auntie Mame earlier. She sent her ward off to boarding school, and it sort of sidestepped that issue of grief. And I knew I very much didn't want to do that.
Yeah, this isn't really a question, but there's so many moments of the book that I just love with, the kids you guys are in a restaurant and you're ordering like desserts for them, and somebody pays for you finally because like they feel for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many beautiful moments in this book. It's not even, I just loved it so much. For anybody watching, the Guncle, you have to get it. It was just so good. So did people, did anybody read this after, I mean, did you run this by anybody before you put it out there for the world, or did you just tell people a little bit like, I'm writing this book, you
Sure,
know?
about the
Yeah.
well, in terms of my family or in terms of just
No,
in
your
general?
family. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like, this is what I'm writing about, and here we go,
Uh,
the publisher. But
yeah.
did
Well,
people
I
read
have
this?
an interesting history of that. My first novel, Lily and the Octopus, was deeply personal, and it was about but it was also a strange little book that I never thought would become. It became a national bestseller and was translated in 20 languages, and a movie is in the works for that as well, and this strange little story that I thought maybe 5 people would read was suddenly widely available. And I had said some things in that book about I changed the names of people and fictionalized things, but I had said some things about my mother, and somehow eagle-eyed readers cracked the code. Mom, that's a difficult name to change. They were really beautiful things. I thought they were honest, but they were really lovely. And so we had a conversation about that after that book came out. And so I think I always try to approach this as sensitively as possible. They're not really moms in in this book, and I think my own mother was finally relieved, like, we're off the mom track. But yeah, it's always interesting when you pull from inspiration from real life. Some people get certainly don't want that attention. There are other people who are like, how come I'm not in the book? So and some people who don't recognize themselves sometimes too. So it's an interesting spectrum. I'm also happen to be married to another writer, and so he's always an early reader for me, and so that's something to navigate too, because sometimes he has to be like, are you asking me to read this for spousal cheering and support and enthusiasm, or are you asking me with the critical eye of another writer to give you notes? And so that's something to navigate too.
Was there, I mean, I'm just curious, was there anything really difficult about writing any part of this book, or was it pretty much all the same and you ran through it, or was there any part of it that was really tough, or
I
not?
think, I did a lot of research about grief and grief in children. And so, that stuff, those things that were sort of outside of my experience a little bit. And ironically, those were the things that I was desperate to get the most right. And so I felt, a real sense of responsibility there. Whereas some of the scenes, I think of a scene particularly with Patrick and the kids, and there's a very expensive Japanese toilet, which is a centerpiece for a comedic chapter, and that I can just sort of let my imagination go, and those are the moments that are fun. But the hard part in balancing a book like this is sometimes if you go one joke too far, it throws off the balance of the whole tone of the book, what you're trying to do. And conversely, if you go too long without letting the reader take a breath with it, through a laugh or through a joke, then conversely, the book can be too sad. And so it's always finding that balance, which I think is the hardest part about writing a book like this.
So everybody wants to know, what are you doing next? What's happening next? Like what can we now expect from you in the future?
Yeah, well,
everybody loves you. So
well, getting a few movie projects off the ground is one thing for sure. I have a new book due July 1st, so I've been writing like mad to make that deadline, and I'm very excited about this new project, which I don't speak too much about it, but I was inspired by there was a movie you may remember from the 80s called The Big Chill.
Yeah.
Do you remember this? Under that great soundtrack with all the 60s music, but it was a group of college friends.
I'm in my 50s. Yes, I remember.
Yeah, me too. I had rewatched that early on in the pandemic, and it's about sort of middle-aged ennui and feeling driftless and what the back half of your life will look like. And these characters dealing with it, and all of them are 35. They're 35 years old in that movie, and I was like, "You're so young. What are you stressed out about?" So it's sort of a more modern day take on that, where I've aged up the characters into their 50s, so that it feels a little bit more appropriate.
I am so excited. So this is a book that's coming.
It'll be out. It'll be out next year. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And
So
then I will say, I've had a lot of people ask. I'm not breaking any news, but a lot of people have asked me if there'll be a sequel to the Guncle. And I will say, I do. Through the experience of writing the film, I do miss these characters. I
yeah.
miss, I miss them quite a bit. It's the first book of mine where I can imagine writing a sequel or checking back in with them again. So, we'll see.
So what's your daily, life like? I mean, do you get up at 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock you start writing, or do you? I mean, what's your life like?
Yeah, it really depends a little bit on where I'm at. Right now my life is all writing all the time, it feels like. So this is a wonderful, way for me to come up and catch my breath a little bit and see other people, because writing can be a very solitary, novel writing can feel a very solitary endeavor. And so right now, yeah, to meet this deadline, I'm writing all the time. But right before a book comes out, for instance, there's lots of publicity and lots of interviews and things you can do too. And because I live in California and publishing is based in New York, I'll switch my day around. Right now, I try to write first, because the day will throw reasons at you or roadblocks in your way to get that done. But right before a book comes out, I've got to prioritize publicity, and then I know come 2 o'clock California time, I'll stop hearing from New York, and I'll do my writing, in the latter half of the day. And so it all depends a little bit, but I like that. I like that mix. And then the film stuff is fun too, because that is, as much as I was complaining about it being collaborative before, when most of your day is spent novel writing, then it's fun to collaborate a little bit. And so I really feel like I've got a good balance going.
So a lot of our book club members are asking, what was the most fun part about writing about the Guncle, in the Guncle? What was the most fun? I don't know, section or the people that you wrote about. What was most fun about writing about it?
I get a lot of questions about Jed, about the thruple next door, which
Yeah.
I think that was such an interesting arrangement to imagine and to think about, his neighbors over the wall. And so they were really fun characters to imagine. I don't think that would be an arrangement for me necessarily, but it's fun, imagining other characters and other situations. But I think, honestly, I think readers of this book will realize pretty quickly that I really enjoy writing the dialogue, and particularly
Yeah.
letting Patrick just blather on with some of his nonsense. That was always like great fun and then to imagine the kids just sort of like, what are you saying? Just having it go over their heads, like those were really fun exchanges to write as well.
So I mean, writing dialogue is difficult. I mean, that's tough. So did you like when you were talking with your, I don't know, partner or best friend, did you actually write down, like, try to record like actual dialogue, or did you just really make all that up in your head when you were writing about that with the kids?
I mean, they really
Because
make
it's really
most.
tough. I mean, I'm a writer too, so it's very tough to write dialogue.
It is tough to write dialogue. And why is that? Because we talk all day, every day. It shouldn't be that hard,
It's hard.
and we make up what we're going to say all, in our real lives. So, but when it comes down to sit at the computer, yeah, it is hard. And we've all read those books where we know the dialogue feels very stilted. I will say, I don't know if anybody listened to the audiobook. I narrated the audiobook, and it's the first time I ever did that.
Wow.
And by the way, the publisher did not necessarily think that was a good idea, and I had to audition to do it.
Really?
So, and I'm sure you've met authors too who it's probably not a good idea that they do it, but I had enough in common, I think, with the character that I thought, I'm going to give it a try. But in doing that, it was the first time I sort of, by how it's the necessity of recording it, I read the book out loud for the first time. And I don't know if I'll record the audiobook for any future titles. I had fun doing it. I found it very rewarding. But what I will always do now is read my book out loud, or read scenes or chapters out loud once I've written them, because you hear them in an entirely different way. And I think that's how you can learn, when the dialogue falls a little flat, is being forced to speak it out loud.
So this is the first time you've ever done anything like that, right?
Yeah, I had a wonderful actor, Michael Urie, TV and Broadway actor, who did my first two audiobooks, and so I decided I wanted to do this one, which I recorded in late 2020, early 2021 or something. And I remember I told her, I was boasting to a friend that I was going to do it. And he went, "You put an actor out of work during a pandemic?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I didn't even think of that." But yeah.
Yeah. So what, just a few more minutes here. So what are you reading that you could recommend? I mean, what authors are you know, passionate about? Is there a TV show you're binging right now? I mean,
Oh my goodness.
can you
Yeah.
recommend some stuff to those of us that are at home wondering what to do?
Sure. I watched this very sweet British series called Heartstopper, which is on Netflix right now, and it is adorable.
Heartstopper.
Heartstopper.
Okay.
It's just about sort of queer joy and these two young boys finding each other. It's the sweetest thing. It's based on some graphic novels by Alice Oseman. I love that to pieces. I'm also flip side of that on Hulu. I'm watching a new series with Jeff Bridges called The Old Man, which
that's
is
supposed
really
to be so
fantastic.
good.
Yeah, Jeff Bridges and John Lithgow, and I love seeing these two sort of masters of their craft face off. That's a lot of fun. For books, you know, I always, you know, my previous novel was called The Editor, and Jacqueline Onassis was a character in it when she was working as a book editor in New York later in her life, and so that's always a challenge, working real life people into fiction. When I finished that, I read a lot of novels that worked real life characters into fiction. And likewise, when I finished the Guncle, I was looking for other titles that balance comedy and drama in the same way. No one needs me to recommend Less by Andrew Sean Greer. It won the Pulitzer Prize, but that's, you know, that's a great one. I love the writing of Mary Norris. She wrote a book called The Comma Queen. She was the longtime copy editor at The New Yorker, and she writes about her adventures with grandma, which sounds really dull, but she is so funny. She is so funny and such a brilliant writer herself. And
I know. I think that's what I mean. In the Girlfriend Book Club, which has like 42,000 members, that's what everybody was saying. It was like, it's so nice to read a book that is funny, and you don't it's not heavy. You don't have to, you know, it's not depressing. It's just great, you know?
yeah.
And I think that's why everybody's reading the Guncle right now. So,
Yay.
you know,
I'll get in trouble if I don't recommend. My husband wrote a book called A Star is Bored.
okay.
For years, he was Carrie Fisher's personal assistant, the actress and writer Carrie Fisher, and so it's inspired by their friendship. It's great fun. If you like the humor and the humor and the, you know, heartfelt nature of this story, you'll like that.
And so I just have to ask, I mean, we're all about friendship at The Girlfriend. I mean, so I you know, with your partner, whatever, beside that, when you get together with your friends, I mean, what do you guys like to do? What's your funnest thing when you have nothing to do on a Saturday night? What do you do? Like,
oh my goodness. Well, you know, we all lead such busy lives now. It's such a treat when we do get together. But honestly, and this is something I've missed terribly over the course of the pandemic, you know, like small dinner parties, like a well-curated dinner party. I love that so much. And talk about being able to pick up, you know, little snippets of dialogue, maybe for a future book. You know, that's always the hard part, you know, about being a writer is I always think of it as an input output endeavor. And it's that we've had all the time for the output because we've been, you know, sheltering at home for a long time, but it's the input part that feels, you know, the coffers feel a little empty. And so I miss having an intimate dinner party with friends. That's always my favorite thing to do.
so when people have a dinner party with you, are they always thinking, don't put this
Watch
in
what you say.
like, I can't talk to you.
They may now. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I mean, the whole book club loves the Guncle. Honestly, you know, 42,000 members chose this book as our book club pick. Steve Rowley. I mean, it's just an honor to talk to you tonight. So thank you so much.
I just feel so blessed. So thank you for that. And I guess I shouldn't have ripped up my AARP card. I was offended when I first got it, but they'll send it again, I'm sure. You know,
okay.
I turned.
Well, when you don't have to be 50 to be an AARP member.
Well, no, I'm definitely more than that, but yeah.
Well, you'll get a lot of discounts. But anyway, okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. The members of the book club, please stay on the book club site because I'm going to be posting some conversation starters so that you guys can talk about the book yourselves. And And thank you guys so much. And thank you for joining us, Stephen. Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you again. I'm grateful.
Thanks.